Chapter 1. The Dream and Departure. Melissa Jones woke with a start, her body still heavy with the remnants of a strange, vivid dream. She blinked rapidly against the early morning light filtering through the curtains, trying to shake the disorienting feeling that clung to her thoughts. The dream was still there, lingering like an aftertaste. A kangaroo, of all things, was boxing a Jamaican man. The oddity of it made her chuckle to herself, though the laughter was hollow, like the sound of someone trying too hard to convince themselves something wasn't important. The kangaroo had bounced on its powerful legs, eyes locked on its foe, while the Jamaican, wearing a vibrant red shirt, had taken a light-hearted stance, smirking in the ring. It wasn't a battle of brute strength. It was more like a dance, a strange kind of confrontation where the unexpected was the norm. The dream was quirky, like something from a late-night comedy show. But for Melissa, it was something more, something that felt like a sign. She just didn't know what it meant yet. She rolled over, the soft cotton of the sheets rustling beneath her as she pushed herself up to sit. Her apartment, though quiet and familiar, felt different this morning. The dream had unsettled her. It was more than just an oddball vision. It hinted at something beneath the surface. A reminder that life, much like her dream, was unpredictable and chaotic, things she usually worked hard to avoid. She glanced at the clock. 7:30 a.m. Time to get moving. Her flight to Jamaica was later that afternoon, but the packing still wasn't done, and there were last-minute errands to run. She stood up, stretching her arms over her head, and headed to the bathroom. The splash of cold water on her face felt good, grounding her. But the strange feeling from the dream stayed with her, nagging at her as she went through her morning routine. Maybe it was the storm that had been brewing in her mind, the one that had nothing to do with weather, and everything to do with the emotional storm she'd been riding for the last few months. As she moved around the apartment, preparing for the trip, Melissa couldn't help but think about the kangaroo. She had been researching some random facts about Jamaica to pass the time, when she stumbled upon an interesting one. She'd read that there were around 45 to 50 million kangaroos in Australia, but only about 2.8 million people in Jamaica. That meant for every Jamaican, there were roughly 16 kangaroos in Australia. It was a bizarre statistic, but for some reason, it captivated her. She couldn't stop thinking about it as she packed her suitcase, folding clothes with precision, organizing her toiletries, and making sure nothing was forgotten. For every Jamaican, there were 16 kangaroos. It felt like a strange, beautiful metaphor for the very journey she was about to take. Jamaica, so different from her structured life in Australia, would be a place where she was forced to confront the chaos she usually avoided. The contrast between her own life and the unfamiliar world ahead of her felt vast and daunting, like the gap between the kangaroo and the Jamaican in her dream. She paused for a moment, standing still in the middle of her bedroom. The walls felt a little too close, the air a little too still. She had always sought control, and yet it had led her here, emotionally distant from the people closest to her, and unsure of where she was headed in life. The trip to Jamaica was meant to be an escape, a temporary reprieve from the uncertainty that had taken over her life recently. The recent breakup had shaken her more than she cared to admit. She had tried to bury the hurt under a mountain of to-do lists and work commitments. But now, as she packed, the feeling seemed impossible to ignore. Melissa hadn't been truly honest with herself in a long time. She had spent years carefully curating a life where things were neat, predictable, and within her control. She had built walls, both around her emotions and her relationships, to avoid vulnerability. Her family had been part of that structure, loving but critical, always questioning her choices. Her mother didn't understand why she wasn't more settled by now, why Melissa was still unsure about what she wanted to do with her life. Her father, who had always pushed her to succeed, had become distant after the breakup. In her mind, she couldn't possibly understand the confusion she felt. So, she built up those walls even higher. Her aunt Kiara, who had moved to Jamaica years ago to become a marine biologist, was the only one who seemed to have a life that Melissa could admire. She had found her calling in a foreign country, leaving behind everything she knew to build a life that was meaningful. For Melissa, that was both a source of envy and a touch of inspiration. It was why she had agreed to visit her aunt, to step away from the chaos she'd created and, perhaps, find a bit of clarity. The trip wasn't just about a vacation. It was about stepping out of her life for a while, seeing what the world beyond her comfort zone had to offer. The thought of Jamaica stirred something inside her, a mixture of excitement and dread. It wasn't just the warm weather or the beautiful beaches that drew her in. It was the chance to reset, to breathe without the pressure of having to make everything perfect, to let go, if only for a few days, of the emotional weight she had been carrying. The dream of the kangaroo boxing the Jamaican seemed to mock her need for control, but at the same time, it urged her to face the unexpected, to embrace the chaos that might just be the key to her own transformation. She finished packing, grabbed her passport, and zipped up her suitcase. It was time to go. She could feel the weight of the decision pressing down on her as she locked the door behind her. She wasn't sure what awaited her in Jamaica, but she had to go. She had to let go of the life she had so carefully constructed and face whatever came next. As Melissa got into the cab for the airport, her mind was still a swirl of thoughts about her future, her relationships, and the strange dream that seemed to be guiding her towards something unknown. She glanced at the sky through the car window, the soft gray clouds a reminder of the storm that had been brewing inside her. The storm wasn't just about the weather. It was about everything she had been avoiding, everything she had pushed aside for the sake of control. And now, it was time to confront it. She arrived at the airport, her heart racing with a mixture of anticipation and fear. The journey ahead was uncertain, but maybe that was exactly what she needed. The airport terminal was buzzing with activity, the steady hum of voices and the shuffle of hurried footsteps filling the space. Melissa moved through the crowd with practiced ease, her mind still clouded with the remnants of her dream. The image of the kangaroo boxing a Jamaican man danced in her head, absurd, yet oddly significant. She couldn't quite shake the feeling that it meant something she wasn't ready to confront just yet. Her fingers grazed the strap of her shoulder bag as she checked her boarding pass for the third time, confirming the gate number. Despite the excitement of the trip ahead, there was an unshakable weight in her chest. It wasn't fear exactly, more like the low hum of unresolved emotions that she had been carrying with her for far too long. The kind of weight you don't notice at first, but it grows heavier the longer you try to ignore it. She had booked her flight to Jamaica months ago, before everything had fallen apart. Before the breakup with David. Before her family's subtle but constant pressure to get it together and settle into a life that looked as structured and controlled as her neatly folded wardrobe. The trip had seemed like a good idea at the time, an escape, a break from the predictable life she had built. But now, as she stood at the threshold of the terminal, it felt like more than just a vacation. It was a moment of reckoning, a chance to confront the things she'd been avoiding. She walked toward the security checkpoint, her steps steady but hesitant. Her black carry-on followed without effort. The weight of it stayed with her anyway. What did she expect to find in Jamaica? What would this trip really change? A small voice in her head told her that the warm sun and crystal clear waters that drew her in it was also the promise of something unknown, something she had been craving for a long time. She wasn't just going to visit her aunt. She was going to escape the life she had built for herself, a life that was beginning to feel too small, too constricting. In Jamaica, she would be a guest in someone else's world, someone whose choices had led to a life of freedom and purpose. Her aunt had found her calling in marine biology, living in a place that was as far from Melbourne as one could get. And while Melissa admired her aunt's courage, she felt helpless to feel a pang of envy. Her aunt had embraced the unknown, and now, here she was, unsure of what she wanted from her own life. As she reached the security line, her phone buzzed in her pocket. She pulled it out, glancing at the screen. It was a message from her mother. "Safe travels, Mel. Don't forget to call when you land." Melissa smiled faintly at the message, but there was an edge to her mother's words. The underlying tone was familiar, the concern, the gentle nudge toward responsibility. Melissa had always felt like she was falling short in her mother's eyes. Maybe it was because, at 29, she still didn't have everything figured out. No clear career paths, no partner, just uncertainty and a steady stream of excuses. Her mother's message, though kind, only reminded her of the expectations that loomed over her. She tucked the phone back into her pocket, forcing herself to focus on the present. The line moved forward, and she placed her bag on the conveyor belt, stepping through the metal detector. A momentary lapse in attention. As she passed through the scanner, the machine beeped, pulling her back to reality. A quick pat-down followed, her body tensing slightly at the intrusive gesture, but she didn't flinch. Melissa was used to being in control, and these small disruptions, the things she couldn't predict, felt like an attack on her sense of stability. Once through security, she headed toward the gate. Her heart rate steadied, but that nagging feeling, the sense that something was unresolved, still lingered. She found a seat by the window and glanced out at the planes waiting on the tarmac. The sight should have brought excitement, but all it did was remind her of the journey she had yet to begin. A journey that wasn't just about a change of scenery, it was about change itself. She wasn't sure she was ready for it. She had never been one to take risks, not when it came to relationships, career choices, or even her own happiness. Melissa had always played it safe, keeping people at arm's length, keeping her feelings tucked away, keeping her plans perfectly arranged. But deep down, she knew that the life she had built was more of a cage than a sanctuary. And now, in the face of everything she had been running from, she was stepping into a world where control would be impossible. The boarding announcement crackled over the loudspeaker, pulling her from her thoughts. Her flight was on time. She glanced at her watch, just under an hour until they started boarding. A slight wave of nervous energy stirred in her, but she welcomed it. It was unfamiliar, but it was also a sign that something was shifting inside her. The sense of inevitability that had followed her for years, the nagging feeling that she was living a life dictated by others, was starting to fade. She wasn't just escaping anymore. She was stepping into the unknown, ready or not. As the line began to form at the gate, Melissa took one last look around the terminal, scanning the faces of the other passengers. Most seemed lost in their own worlds, hurrying to their destinations, plugged into their phones, or lost in their thoughts. Melissa envied their ease, their ability to just be. She knew she couldn't stay in this space forever, this halfway point between the life she had left behind and the life she was about to begin. She stood up, gripping her suitcase handle with a new sense of resolve. She was leaving Australia, leaving her controlled world behind. The storm of change was on the horizon, and she couldn't outrun it. But maybe, just maybe, she could learn to live through it. As the plane began to taxi down the runway, Melissa settled into her seat, her hands clutching the armrests as she gazed out the window. The vast stretch of the tarmac seemed endless, much like the uncertainty she felt inside. She took a deep breath, trying to steady her nerves, but the anxiety of leaving her life behind remained, lingering like an uninvited guest. The engines roared to life, and with a gentle jolt, the plane surged forward, gaining speed. The smoothness of the ascent didn't help calm her. It only amplified the swirling thoughts in her mind. She thought of her parents, their brief phone call that morning, filled with small talk and polite well wishes, never quite reaching the deeper level of connection she longed for. Despite her mother's warmth, the distance between them seemed as vast as the ocean she was about to cross. Melissa leaned back in her seat, closing her eyes for a moment, allowing the soft hum of the plane to fill the space around her. But even in the relative peace, her thoughts kept drifting back to her aunt. Aunt Kiara had made a life for herself in Jamaica, a life that was messy, beautiful, and full of purpose. Unlike Melissa's life back in Australia, which felt calculated and compartmentalized, Aunt Kiara's existence seemed to flow effortlessly, like the sea she studied. It wasn't always easy, Melissa knew. Her aunt had faced her own challenges and losses, but she had embraced them and transformed them into something meaningful. That was something Melissa had been avoiding for so long. Emotion, vulnerability, change. She had kept herself closed off, wrapped up in layers of routine and control, convincing herself that if she followed the script, everything would stay manageable, safe. But nothing about her recent breakup had been safe. Nothing about her confusion over her future felt comfortable. So why, she wondered, had she been running from it all this time? Wasn't it time to stop playing it safe? The thought made her restless, so she shifted in her seat and pulled out the travel magazine she had bought at the airport. She flipped through it absent-mindedly, but the words blurred in front of her eyes. Instead of reading, her mind kept circling back to the same question. What was she hoping to find in Jamaica? Was it simply a distraction from her problems? Or was there something deeper at play? Something that could help her unravel the knots she'd tied around herself. The flight attendants began making their rounds, offering drinks and snacks. But Melissa wasn't hungry. She passed on the offer, instead reaching for her phone to check for any messages. There was a text from her friend Natalie, who had been asking her every few days how she was feeling about the trip. Excited for Jamaica? Melissa smiled at the message, but didn't respond immediately. The truth was, she wasn't sure how she felt. She had been so busy keeping everything together, managing the tasks of daily life, that she hadn't allowed herself to process her emotions. It wasn't until this moment, flying thousands of feet above the ground, that it really hit her. She was running away. But where was she going? And what would she find when she got there? As the plane climbed higher, the city below shrinking to a blur of lights and shadows, Melissa looked out the window, the landscape of her life starting to feel like a distant memory. She was leaving behind the familiar, the quiet streets of Melbourne, the predictable rhythm of her work, the steady pull of her family's expectations. It all seemed so small now, fading away beneath the clouds. Her thoughts drifted back to the dream, the kangaroo, the Jamaican, the absurdity of it. She'd never given much thought to the meaning of dreams before, but this one felt different. Maybe it was just her subconscious playing with her, as it seemed to speak to the larger narrative of her life. The kangaroo, a creature so emblematic of her home country, and the Jamaican, a representation of the unknown, of new beginnings, of untapped potential. She wondered if it was a sign that she was about to face something unexpected, something she couldn't control. The soft click of the seatbelt sign turning off broke her reverie. The fasten seatbelt light dimmed, signaling that they had reached cruising altitude. Melissa relaxed into her seat a little, letting go of the tension in her shoulders. As the plane hummed steadily along, she found herself reflecting on her aunt's life, the life she had chosen to build on her own terms. Aunt Kiara had chosen the risk of uncertainty, while Melissa had chosen the security of control. The contrast felt stark, but it was also clear. Melissa wasn't satisfied with her own choices anymore. She needed something different. She needed to break free, not just from her family's expectations, but from her own self-imposed limitations. Maybe this is it, she murmured to herself, half under her breath. Maybe this is the start of something new. It wasn't a grand realization, but it felt like the first flicker of hope, an acknowledgement that something had to change. The internal walls she had built around herself had been crumbling for a while, and now it seemed they were ready to fall completely. Jamaica would be the place where she finally faced what lay beyond them. She closed her eyes again, letting the steady rhythm of the plane soothe her. The uncertainty, the fear, the excitement, they were all part of the journey. It was not just about what she would find in Jamaica. It was about what she would uncover within herself. As the plane continued its journey, Melissa let herself drift into a quiet contemplation, ready for whatever awaited her. The storm of change, the one she had spent so long avoiding, was no longer something to fear. She was finally ready to let it in.